Our story begins nearly 3,000 years ago, in the 9th century BC, on the land that would one day be called Armenia. Here rose a formidable kingdom named Urartu, a name the Assyrians wrote into their inscriptions with fear and grudging respect. Its capital, Tushpa, stood on the shores of Lake Van, guarded by fortresses of massive hand-cut stone that still stand in modern Turkey, silent and immense. These mountain people were extraordinary engineers, carving irrigation canals through solid rock, some of which still carry water nearly 3,000 years later. They raised temples to their god Kaldi and recorded their triumphs in cuneiform pressed into clay and stone. But greatness has a price. Squeezed by Assyria from the south and later by nomadic invaders from the north, Urartu wore away like stone under rain. By the 6th century BC, the kingdom collapsed. And it was in that vacuum of power that something new stirred, a name never heard before. In the rock-cut inscriptions of Darius the Great at Behistun, the word Armenian appears for the first time in recorded history. Historians consider this the true birth certificate of Armenian identity, not because a people sprang from nothing, but because in the crucible of this rocky plateau, the native Urartian population fused with newly arrived Indo-European tribes into a single people with a single language. That language, astonishingly, is still spoken by millions today, nearly unbroken across 3 millennia. For centuries afterward, Armenia lived in the long shadow of its neighbors' empires. First the Achaemenids, then the Seleucids, sometimes a dependent satrapy, sometimes enjoying a fragile measure of self-rule. But in the 1st century BC, a moment arrived that Armenians still remember as the summit of their ancient glory. His name was Tigranes II, remembered by history as Tigranes the Great. Under his rule, Armenia's borders swelled from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean, sweeping in territory from Mesopotamia to the Caucasus. Word of his power echoed across the ancient world. He placed upon his own head a crown adorned with a rising star, a symbol of his ambition to lift Armenia into the company of history's great empires. Tigranes built a magnificent new capital, Tigranokerta, and filled it with artists, philosophers, and merchants from across the Greek-speaking world. But the peak of power is often only the beginning of a steep fall. Armenia's runaway expansion drew the alarmed attention of Rome, pressing its influence eastward. The Roman generals Lucullus and later Pompey shattered Tigranes' armies one after another, forcing him to surrender most of what he had conquered. This pattern, a glorious rise followed by a crushing fall beneath a larger power, would repeat again and again throughout Armenian history, as though this nation's fate was to live among empires rather than beside them. At the dawn of the 4th century AD, while Rome was still persecuting Christians and years before Constantine's Edict of Toleration in Milan, something happened inside Armenia that would alter its history forever. A man named Grigor, later known as Gregory the Illuminator, endured years of imprisonment and torture at the order of King Tigranes III. And yet, against all odds, Gregory succeeded in healing the king from a severe affliction of the mind that no one else had cured. Or so the story has been told for 17 centuries. Moved by this apparent miracle, Tigranes not only embraced Christianity himself, but in the year 301 AD, declared it the official religion of his kingdom. It made Armenia the first nation on earth to formally adopt Christianity at the level of the state, earlier, remarkably, than Rome itself. This was never merely a religious choice. It welded Armenian identity to the Christian faith forever, even as the country found itself squeezed between the Zoroastrian, Sasanian Empire and Rome. The Armenian Church, later the Armenian Apostolic Church, became the backbone of Armenian identity, the one thing that endured even when the state and the land itself were lost. A people who kept their language and their church still felt themselves a nation, even without political borders. This bond between faith and identity is the key to understanding how Armenians would never dissolve into the surrounding empires, even when they possessed no state of their own. If Christianity shaped the Armenian soul, the next great event ensured the Armenian mind and language for all time. In the early 5th century, a scholarly monk named Mesrop Mashtots recognized a danger looming larger than anyone else seemed to notice. Christian scripture was being read aloud in Greek and Syriac, languages ordinary Armenians could not understand. If this continued, Armenians would slowly dissolve into the culture of their more powerful neighbors. With the backing of King Vrhamshapu and Catholicos Sahak, Mashtots undertook a feat rarely matched in world history. He invented an entirely new alphabet for the Armenian language, 36 letters precisely capturing every sound of Armenian speech. This alphabet, created in 405 AD, immediately became the instrument for translating the Bible, philosophy, and science into Armenian. Schools and monasteries sprang up where monks labored day and night copying and translating, a period Armenians still call the golden age of their literature. In the centuries that followed, as Armenia was divided again and again among Persian, Byzantine, Arab, Mongol, Ottoman, and Russian empires, this alphabet and the literature built upon it became an invisible thread binding scattered Armenians together. In the absence of a homeland, language itself became the homeland. Half a century after the alphabet's invention, Armenia faced a terrifying test. The Sasanian Empire, ruling over eastern Armenia, decided to force the Zoroastrian faith upon its Christian subjects. In 451 AD, an Armenian commander named Vardan Mamikonian gathered a small, outnumbered force of peasants and nobles and stood against the vast Sasanian army on the plain of Avarar. Militarily, the battle was an unambiguous defeat, but what followed transformed it into one of the most identity-defining moments in Armenian history. Seeing the Armenians' fierce resistance and weighing the cost of continued suppression, the Sasanian king abandoned his campaign to impose Zoroastrianism and let Armenians freely practice their Christian faith. For this reason, Armenians remember Avarar not as a defeat, but as a spiritual victory, a battle in which faith triumphed over the sword. This became a template repeated again and again throughout later Armenian history, losing the battlefield but keeping the soul, losing the war but never losing identity. To this day, the Armenian Church honors Vardan and his fallen comrades every year, and Armenian mothers name their sons after him. The Middle Ages did not pass gently over Armenia. Successive waves of Turkic and then Mongol invasions, beginning in the 11th century, trampled repeatedly across the plateau. In 1045, the capital city of Ani, so magnificent in its golden age that it earned the name, the City of 1,001 Churches, fell to the Byzantines. Shortly after, in 1064, the Seljuks razed it to the ground. An earthquake in the 13th century, followed by Mongol invasions, reduced whatever remained to ruins that stand today, right on the border between Turkey and Armenia. Like a ghost of vanished greatness, a city Armenians are not even freely permitted to visit, since it lies beyond a closed frontier, As central authority collapsed in the homeland, many Armenians migrated south toward the Mediterranean. In the 12th century, they founded a new kingdom, Cilician Armenia, on the coast of what is today southern Turkey. This kingdom built close ties with the European Crusaders and turned its ports into a thriving hub of trade between East and West, enduring for nearly 3 centuries. But it too collapsed in 1375 under blows from the Mamluks of Egypt. The last independent Armenian kingdom vanished for centuries, and Armenians became a nation without a state, living within empires that belonged to others. From the 16th century onward, the Armenian homeland became a battlefield between 2 empires, the Sunni Ottomans to the west and the Shia Safavids to the east. Repeated wars swept again and again across Armenian soil until in 1639, the Treaty of Kasr-e-Shirin finally divided Armenia between them. The western portion to the Ottomans, the eastern to Safavid Persia. This division, whose imprint still marks Armenian cultural geography today, pulled a single people toward 2 very different fates. In this same era, Shah Abbas of Persia forcibly deported thousands of Armenian families from Old Yulfa deep into the heart of Iran. A calculated move meant to halt the Ottoman advance and empty the border regions. Many perished along the way, but those who reached Isfahan founded a new quarter called New Yulfa, which grew into one of the most important centers of Armenian global trade and a brilliant cultural hub. Its churches, their walls painted with murals blending biblical scenes with Persian miniature artistry, still stand in Isfahan today, living proof that Armenians, even in exile, always found a way to build something new from the ashes. The 19th century carried a fresh wind of European nationalist ideas across the declining Ottoman Empire, and the Western Armenians, who had lived under Ottoman rule for centuries, were swept up in it too. Newspapers, schools, and political parties took shape in Istanbul, demanding reform, legal equality, and eventually autonomy for the Armenian-populated provinces of eastern Anatolia. But instead of reform, this awakening was met with suspicion, seen as a security threat, a perception that culminated in the Hamidian massacres of 1894 to 1896, claiming hundreds of thousands of victims and serving as a grim prelude to a far greater catastrophe. That catastrophe arrived in 1915. With the outbreak of the First World War and Ottoman defeats on the Caucasus front, the Young Turk government accused Armenians of collaborating with Russia and used the accusation as pretext to order the forced deportation of millions from their ancestral homes. What followed was one of the darkest chapters in 20th century history. Death marches through the deserts of Syria, the massacre of intellectuals in Istanbul, and organized killing through starvation, thirst, and violence that, according to most historians, sent between 1 and 1.5 million Armenians to their deaths. Armenians call this Metz-Yegern, the Great Catastrophe. Today it is formally recognized as the Armenian Genocide by many countries, though Turkey still refuses that designation. The wound remains more than a century later, alive in every Armenian household, renewed each year on the 24th of April. In the middle of this catastrophe, amid the chaos of the collapsing Russian Tsarist Empire, in 1918, for the first time since the fall of Cilician Armenia, an independent flag rose over Yerevan, the Republic of Armenia. This fledgling republic, born amid ruins and a flood of refugees who had survived the genocide, struggled from its first days with famine, disease, and war with its neighbors. Yet for a people who had just emerged from the greatest catastrophe of their history, the mere existence of a flag and a government was a symbol of hope. But this small republic, surrounded on every side and lacking real backing from the great powers, did not live long. In 1920, Turkish nationalist forces under Mustafa Kemal advanced from the west, while the Bolshevik Red Army poured in from the north. Caught between these two forces, the Republic of Armenia was forced to capitulate, and by year's end it became one of the Soviet republics. 2 years of independence, only 2, yet in Armenia's memory, this short-lived republic holds a special place. It proved that even after genocide, even after losing the ancestral homeland in the West, the will to build an independent state had never truly died. 70 years under the Soviet system left a double-edged imprint on Armenia. On one hand, Moscow suppressed religion, sent thousands of Armenian clergy and intellectuals to their deaths, or to labor camps during Stalin's great purges of the 1930s, and erased many national traditions beneath the veneer of communist ideology. On the other hand, this era brought rapid industrialization, universal education, new universities and scientific institutions, and a stability of borders unprecedented after centuries of war and division. Yerevan, a small and muddy town at the start of the century, was transformed under architect Alexander Temanian into a city of wide boulevards, pink volcanic stone, and grand public squares, known today as the Pink City. But behind this modern facade, the fire of national identity was never extinguished. In 1965, on the 50th anniversary of the genocide, thousands of Armenians, defying Soviet authorities, poured spontaneously into the streets of Yerevan to honor the victims, the first clear sign that this nation's collective memory had remained untouched, even beneath the heaviest ideological repression. The 1980s opened for Armenia with 2 fateful blows. First, in 1988, a popular movement arose in Yerevan and in the mountainous region of Nagorno-Karabakh, a region whose population was overwhelmingly Armenian, but which had been attached, since Stalin's time, to Soviet Azerbaijan. Through vast peaceful demonstrations, the people demanded that the region be joined to Armenia. Set against Gorbachev's glasnost, this movement became one of the first sparks of open nationalism across the crumbling Soviet Union, and it soon spiraled into bloody conflict between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. And then, in the midst of that unrest, on the 10th of December, 1988, the earth beneath Armenia shook. A devastating earthquake, centered near Spitak, reduced Spitak, Leninakan, and countless surrounding villages to rubble in under half a minute. More than 25,000 people died and 500,000 were left homeless. A disaster so immense it forced even the sluggish Soviet machine to accept international aid for the first time in decades. Wrestling at once with natural catastrophe and the first flames of the Karabakh War, Armenians came to a bitter realization that Moscow had neither the strength nor the will to protect them. That harsh understanding became fuel for the independence movement, which only 3 years later, in 1991, alongside the complete collapse of the Soviet Union, finally bore fruit. And Armenia, after 70 years, raised its independent flag once more. Armenia's renewed independence in September 1991 was celebrated even as the country found itself locked in a full-scale war with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh. Instead of the prosperity many had expected after the Soviet collapse, the first years of independence brought economic blockade from Azerbaijan and an allied Turkey, Endless power and gas outages through brutal winters and long lines for bread, years Armenians still call the Dark Years. Even so, in 1994, a fragile ceasefire halted the First Karabakh War, leaving Armenian forces in control not only of Nagorno-Karabakh, but several surrounding districts. Though this outcome never translated into international recognition or lasting peace, the 1990s and 2000s saw Armenia navigate the difficult passage from a Soviet-planned economy to a free market, marked by widespread corruption, mass emigration in search of work, and deep social inequality. Yet through this same period, Armenia quietly shaped its diplomatic identity in the post-Soviet world, joining international organizations, preserving close ties with Russia as a security guarantor, and deepening bonds with its vast diaspora in France, the United States, Lebanon, and Iran, scattered across the globe after the genocide, yet never severed from the motherland. In the spring of 2018, anger over political corruption and economic stagnation broke open in a peaceful civic movement led by journalist and parliamentarian Nikol Pashinyan. Thousands of people, young and old, filled the streets of Yerevan in calm, sustained marches until, without a drop of blood spilled, they forced the sitting prime minister to resign and swept Pashinyan into power, an event the world's media dubbed Armenia's Velvet Revolution, one that briefly breathed fresh hope for democracy into Armenian society. But that hope met a heavy blow only 2 years later, in the autumn of 2020. Azerbaijan, equipped with advanced Turkish and Israeli drones, and backed openly by Turkey, launched a sweeping assault on Nagorno-Karabakh. The 44-day war that followed turned that autumn into one of the bitterest recent chapters of Armenian history, ending in severe military defeat and the loss of much of the territory Armenians had controlled since 1994. Thousands of young Armenians lost their lives, and the final ceasefire, brokered by Russia, returned historic towns such as Shushi to Azerbaijani control. A blow that echoed once again that same bitter, recurring pattern. A nation that has repeatedly paid for its survival in pain and lost land at the hands of powers greater than itself. 3 years later, in September 2023, Azerbaijan seized what remained of Nagorno-Karabakh in a lightning operation. In its wake, nearly the entire Armenian population of the region, some 120,000 people, abandoned their several thousand-year-old homeland forever, streaming in a long, sorrowful convoy into Armenia. Many Armenians see this forced exodus as merely the latest chapter of an old wound. The loss of homeland repeated, from Ani to Van, across centuries today. Armenia is a small, landlocked country in the South Caucasus, with fewer than 3 million people within its borders, while its diaspora, scattered from Los Angeles to Moscow, from Paris to Beirut, is estimated by some to number 2 or 3 times that figure. The country still faces profound challenges. Insecurity along its eastern border with Azerbaijan, heavy dependence on Russia amid a war in Ukraine that has upended the region's balance, and a fresh wave of youth emigration casting a shadow over its demographic future. And yet Yerevan today is a city full of life, cafes that stay open deep into the night, a booming technology industry drawing young Armenians home, and the Matena Daran, a museum where thousands of ancient manuscripts, still written in the alphabet Mashtots created 16 centuries ago, remain lovingly preserved. Medieval stone churches, Khor Virap, at the foot of Mount Ararat, and Gegard, carved into living rock. welcome pilgrims every day, people who come simply to touch something that has endured for thousands of years and remains a source of profound pride. The story of Armenia is, in the end, a beautiful contradiction. A nation repeatedly sacrificed on the chessboard of empires far larger than itself, and yet one that, again and again, has stood back up, reaching with quiet defiance toward a better tomorrow.